Good morning. All right. So, glad to see you guys join us. We're running a few minutes behind. Live is hard mode, and we were finishing up a couple of pre-production discussion points. This morning, we've got one of our favorite special guests with us, Legion, on camera. Good morning, Sunshine.
Good morning, all.
So this morning, what we're going to be talking about, y'all let me know how that mic is doing, because that sounded a little hot on my end. That's okay. Don't mess with your mic, Mario. Let me handle it over here. So y'all let me know if Mario's coming through good and clear for you. But this morning we're going to be talking about this. Basically, the entire idea for this show started with this tweet right here. So Taylor Van Kirk is the press secretary for J.D. Vance, and posted this little video of Vance and his boy Vivek and his dog Atlas. So this is a 10-month-old lab puppy. Beautiful dog. But Vance just goes on for full troll and says to everyone asking, I can confirm Atlas has bitten 0 Secret Service agents. Right? Now, here's what got my brain bubbling, is this Wendy Patterson lady who, she's just some chick on X. But she said, it's sad how you're turning campaigning into your personal carnival. This election isn't about you. Set your liberal look at me feelings aside and focus on the election. So what we're looking at here is somebody who is a Trump supporter that is not happy about the way that Vance is campaigning. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Because I replied to her, and I actually took the description for this morning's show from this. Dear Wendy, I'm going to try to say this without beating up on you, but you're wrong here. The facts are these. This has become a vibes election. And when I say this has become a vibes election, I shit you not. The Harris campaign has an employed position, a paid position in the campaign, whose job it is to monitor social media and analyze the feelings that people are expressing about the candidates. That job title, I shit you not, the job title is the Vibrarian.
Cringe alert.
I'll grant that's actually clever. That's clever branding. It's adorable. It is. But the fact of what that job is should horrify all of you. And here's why. So I go on to explain. This has become a vibes election. The Kamala Harris campaign has done that on purpose. We who support real Donald Trump and J.D. Vance would prefer that the election be about our demonstrably superior policy positions and outcomes, but it simply isn't. Now, when I say demonstrably superior, we can look at the track record. Since Kamala Harris took office, and let's not get confused on that, they're trying to run her campaign as if she's the outsider. Right? So we get this back and forth between Kamala Harris and Kamala Harris, where she's constantly saying, I'm super proud of the work Joe Biden and I have done. Bidenomics is working. All the good stuff that Joe and I have done. And, oh, by the way, everything in the country is wrong, and I'm going to fix it when I become president. Like, well, which is it, Sunshine? Either you've done a good job, or you're going to do a better job. Either you've done a good job, and there's nothing that needs to be fixed, or you failed miserably, and everything has to be fixed. You can't have it both ways, but that's what they're trying to do. right?
That's been my key criticism of the Harris Waltz campaign up to this point. Just is basically from the DNC convention, and since then they're running as if they are not the incumbent party. You know what I mean?
Cool.
They're running as if Donald Trump is in the White House right now, and they're going to take it back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not complicated. The Democrat Party is now and always has been the party of trannies. They think they can have everything both ways. So we're not making the case. We're not making a case to sensible, rational voters here. Voters who prefer low gas prices, free enterprise, and world peace. Those people are already with Trump and Vance. Neither are we making a case to the vote blue no matter who crowd. Those people are sociopaths. They cannot be swayed by rational argument, policy positions, and outcomes. They're not intellectually capable of understanding what came before. Rather, it's that 3% that Romney talked about, right? So Mario mentioned this earlier, and I said, "Oh yeah, that's a great reference to come back to."
These 3% comprise the critical mouth breathing sector of the electorate.
Correct. There are people who say the 3% is largely made up of midwits who believe that it makes you sound intelligent and thoughtful when you say, "I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm weighing both sides and trying to come to a conclusion because sometimes the Republican is better and sometimes the Democrat is better." Listen, midwits. The Democrat is always a communist who wants to mutilate your children and murder them. The world is that simple today. It may have seemed like it was different 40 years ago, but the fact is they were just building up their slippery slope to get to the communism and baby murder that they always wanted, right? But Romney got in a lot of hot water. Now, I can't believe I'm about to make a defense of a Romney statement because I'll be very clear on this. I hated Romney when he was running for president. He was a problem. Sergeant Major points out all revolutions are won by less than 3%. More correctly, all revolutions are fought by less than 3%, started by less than 3%. But the 3% that start revolutions are not the same group of people that you're trying to sway when you're running for a political office. This is a very different group of wishy-washy, midwit, pseudo-intellectuals. So the Romney quote was, "There are 47% who are with him, he said there are 47% who are with him at the time, meaning Barack Obama, who are dependent on government, check, believe that they are victims, check, believe the government has a responsibility to care for them, check, believe that they are entitled to health care, to food, to housing, you name it, check, 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 and check." And then he said, "My job is not to worry about those people. I'll never convince them that they should take personal responsibility and care for their lives." And that's an absolute fact. You cannot convince a Democrat that personal responsibility is a factor in life choices.
It's the smartest thing I've ever heard Romney say, actually. And
it's probably the single most intelligent thing he's ever said in his life.
He took fire from both sides. I remember back in 2011, and yes, I know. I used to subscribe to National Review. All right, magazine went to hell. They all got Trump derangement syndrome, and basically they were all but done for in 2016. But yeah, I was reading.
They were purchased by China.
But no, I remember reading criticism.
Mario, I mean, I understand making mistakes in the past. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and it's too much. They're not worth the trouble to revoke the membership.
Yeah, I mean, a brief aside here: the NRA, like, they could have unincorporated a new.
Nope, Mario froze up. So while we're waiting to hopefully get Mario back, I'm gonna bring up the next article and start reading it. He dropped out. Hopefully he comes back in. There he is. You should invest in better internet. We lost you for a second there, so we're just gonna pop over to the article. So The article's fantastic. This is from ericbowling.com. Secret Service agents bitten. Vance trolls Biden with post about his dog. And that's the post that we started with here. He says, to everyone asking, I can confirm Atlas has bitten 0 Secret Service agents. So this article from, well, I don't see a date on it, but this article is from like 2022.
He's had
right?
2 dogs in the White House, and they've both bitten.
And they were both monsters.
Yeah.
But, Joe Biden dog Commander bit Secret Service agents at least 24 times, right? President Joe Biden's dog Commander bit U.S. Secret Service agents at least 24 times. Records show the extent to which the German Shepherd caused chaos for the presidential bodyguards. One senior agent noted the bites meant the Secret Service changed tactics, advising agents to give lots of room. The warning came months before Commander was removed from the White House. The documents were revealed through Freedom of Information requests and posted online. They're heavily redacted to protect the identity of Secret Service agents and secrecy of their security tactics. So, Biden had a problem with dogs. And there's a thing about, there's a sort of traditional wisdom around dogs, right? People who dogs don't like people generally tend to look at people who are not liked by domesticated dogs and think poorly of them. And
you want to talk about vibrarians, okay? Dogs definitely they get the vibe, okay?
Yes.
They
who doesn't get the vibe?
They know people who Biden.
Cats.
True.
Right. It's interesting that we're having this conversation, but you got to and. We're talking about J.D. Vance, who famously said, so many of the leaders of the left, such as teachers, they're people without kids trying to brainwash the minds of our children. Randy Weingartner, she doesn't have a single child. She wants to brainwash and destroy the minds of children. She should have some of her own and leave ours the hell alone. And that's absolutely true. That is one of the things that gives us Democrats. You hear a lot of talk about the black vote. But really, the vote that we need to be concerned about is the awful vote.
Yep.
Right? The affluent white female liberal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Basically, you're talking about rich trophy wives with no children sitting around hyped up on goofballs all day. They're sucking down mommy's little helpers, and they've got no mommy in to be helped with. So they're just in their wine and Valium-induced stupor, and then they go pull the lever for the communist because, other people don't have children. I don't have no children. Everybody else should abort theirs.
I've joked with my friends that if you want Trump to win, if you're fighting for that last 1%, then take one for the team and sleep with an awful on November 4th. That way they wake up November 5th and they're in a better
mood.
Then they might be in a better mood. Leave the MAGA hat at the bedside.
This orgasm brought to you and sponsored by Donald Trump. I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Yep.
That's rock solid.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
We've got the 3%. So we've got it. A lot of it isn't people who are actually undecided. It's people who are undecided, but on whether or not they're going to vote at all. Okay, so when these type of meta campaigns or this vibe campaign, okay, as Harris describes it, yeah, it's trying to convince the people who have no intention of voting whatsoever to maybe get out there and actually, drop a ballot for Trump or for Harris. Okay.
Hey, real quick. I know this is probably going to break your train of thought, and I hate to do it, but I don't want to lose this one because Dad made a comment, and this is worth talking about for a second.
Probably.
Sergeant Major asks, so Secret Service agents are not good people? In fairness, that's a reasonable criticism. That's a very reasonable criticism of what we were just talking about. But let me make this point. Donald Trump was shot in the head as a direct result of the grotesque security failures. The security failures so substantial that reasonable people are suspicious that the Secret Service agents were actively involved in creating the opportunity for that assassination to occur. And then we watched the chief of the Secret Service, a woman whose stated objective was to DEI her way to a minimum of 30% female Secret Service agents. Fuck qualification. And we saw that one of the things that put Trump in more danger is he had several women on his detail who were not tall enough to protect him. Because as a Secret Service agent, part of your job is to be a meat shield. If you're 4'3", you can't be a meat shield for a 6'4" man. It's just not an option. So my original intent when we were having that conversation to begin with was not actually to disparage the Secret Service agents, but given the facts on the ground, that may be a reasonable assumption to make.
I've got something briefly on that. Okay, you look at, the corruption within the institutions. You look at the the IRS, the FBI, the DOJ. Okay, all of them have been corrupted. All of them have lost. The public has lost faith in them. What makes you think that the rot is just contained to that? It's not. Of course, the USSS, the United States Secret Service, I guarantee there's institutional corruption there as well. Okay,
and part of that goes to the leadership. Like I just said, the DEI hire head of the Secret Service at the time, who has now stepped down. I forget her name now, but it doesn't matter. This woman was clearly essentially a communist motivated agent, whose stated objective was essentially, when she said she wanted to replace 30% of the Secret Service agents with women without any mention or conversation about the qualifications of the agent, she's essentially stating plainly that her objective as the chief of the Secret Service was to sabotage the Secret Service agency. Right. And anytime somebody starts talking about making hires, okay, we need X number of blacks, we need X number of women, we need X number of homosexuals, so that we have equity and inclusivity and diversity in our hiring practices. What they're saying is that we intend to sabotage your operation. Right? Now, stick with me on this. I'm not saying that there are not black people or women or homosexuals even who are not qualified to do jobs. But when you make it your objective to hire those kinds of people, what you do is you take the entire pool of talent and you select a group of those people, and without considering the merit of their qualifications, you eliminate them outright. So it may be possible that from that significantly smaller data sample, you can find eminently qualified people, but your chances, especially in a country that is majority white, and where the majority of the white people who are applying to jobs are men, and your objective, your decision, is to take the majority of your candidates and excise them based on immutable characteristics, you are making a willful choice to not hire the best people qualified. And
you're making the human resources, okay, the human resources aspect of an organization, the actual mission itself, okay, that's worthless.
Right, and
okay?
Here Diego says it like this, and this is very well phrased. A lawyer who happens to be gay, as opposed to a gay who happens to be a lawyer. Exactly. When you make the decision to hire based on the immutable characteristic, it's okay. I need a black guy. Okay, there's 1,000 of them. Hey, raise your hand if you happen to be a lawyer. Oh, great. I need a civil rights attorney. Are you good at that? Well, I'm a family lawyer. Close enough. Come on. Right? So, and then the other part of that is it doesn't even take the individual members at the Secret Service or any organization, be it private or public, being corrupted individually. If the leadership is broken, then the orders coming down, right? Your orders are never going to be, hey, you subordinate, I want you to go and perform this unethical action. It's, I want this unethical action to be performed. Let's take military corruption, for example. You're not going to say, hey, Alpha Company, this is a neighborhood full of Trump supporters and we want you to go kill them all. What you're going to say is, hey, Alpha Company, this neighborhood, we have credible intelligence that there is a terrorist threat from this neighborhood, and we want you to go and patrol it with arms. And then we'll just see what happens. And then on top of that, not only are the corrupted orders being filtered through in that way, so that the actual corrupt, the mens rea, as it were, doesn't make it to the individual actor, but it's also the case that the individual actor has been trained, and their methods, their tactics, their their skills, their schematic understandings, all of that, their technical talents, everything has been crafted by the corrupt leadership.
Yeah.
So they don't even have a willful, volitional intention of corruption. It has been installed, and that's kind of that goes back to the Lois Lerner thing that we've talked about many times before. Lois Lerner
Here, real quick about that.
was not given a direct order.
For the IRS. Yeah.
Lois Lerner was not given a direct order by the White House. She was made to understand by media impressions and her social surroundings that Barack Obama would be pleased if she were to do the corrupt thing, if she were to shuffle the 501c3 applications down to the bottom of the stack if they were conservative, right? So in that case, she was sufficiently corrupted by the leadership to make decisions based on the expectation of what the leadership might prefer.
Let me jump in real quick. I wanted to talk about your, corruption of a mission of like a military operation, okay? And how like the mens rea doesn't make it down to the actual individual troop. So, like for example, look at the Department of Justice. They repeatedly state that the number one threat to the country is violent right-wing extremists. Okay, despite the lack of evidence towards that. Okay,
Correct.
they repeatedly state that. So that becomes basically the apex, all right, of the what the mission is. Okay, and then built around that are going to be like the CIRs, the Commander's Intelligence Requirements. Okay, so it instantly, just by fact alone that exists at the top, creates all these little subcategories of different questions being asked about the false premise, which rests at the top. Okay, so you got all of these agents basically searching for answers to the minutia of what is ultimately a false premise, that the number one threat in the country is violent right-wing extremists. All right, so and because it's false, okay, they're searching for information that isn't there. All right, so they're basically going down the rabbit hole, and the lack of information, the lack of evidence that they find towards this is just they don't have. They're just going to keep looking. They're going to keep looking for something that isn't there, and it doesn't matter how many lives get torn apart in the process. So I think that's an example of what you said.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellently played. So let's get back to the conversation about the vibes.
Right. So the 3 to 7%. Okay, like the super low information, zero information voter who will vote if it's convenient for them or if they're in a good mood on November 5th. You know what I mean? Or it's one of the biggest weaknesses, I think, of democracy is depending on these people. You know, it's like every 4 years, the country is held hostage by the current emotional state of women. You know, like J.D. Vance was criticizing, rightly, maybe not politically, maybe that's not politically smart, but he is right. Okay, you know, people who aren't happy and people who see no path towards happiness, all right, despite what they tell themselves, and despite, you know, the feel goods, okay, that come from whatever their media choices are and whatever they invest their, you know, what do they invest their empty lives in, whether it's Netflix
Right.
shows or cats or wine or travel or whatever. Yeah, the country is held hostage every 4 years by the current condition of these predominantly women offals. So
Mario,
And
and there's some crossover between those and what Sergeant Major says here. His Majesty says if you want a good example of corruption, look at female officers in combat arms. I'll
yeah,
take that a step further. We've talked about this many times. I am not one who believes that women belong in the military. And hey, I met my wife because we were both active duty when we met. Right, my wife served in the Navy, but the fact of the matter is that if you are in the military, right, the argument for putting women in the military, for putting women in boots, was always the equal work for equal pay argument. And today,
yeah,
it is equal pay for men and for women. Right, men
yeah.
get paid the same as women in the army. So your pay is based on time and service, on your rank, et cetera, and you get equal pay for you get equal pay, but it is not for equal work. A woman cannot carry a military combat load, right? And the vast majority. And not all women. Yes, all women. Your hips are designed wrong for the task. Women are less capable, less physically competent to do the job than men are. It is so immutably true. It is so immutably the case that even though the military pays the same, no matter your gender, there is a different physical standard for women because they cannot meet the physical standard for men. Women cannot do the, they can't do the 50 push-ups in 2 minutes. They can't run 2 miles in 15 minutes. They have a very different standard. They are held to a lower physical standard. And until very recently, they could not deploy in support of combat arms. And even today, women in combat arms are almost non-existent. And even those who are in combat arms are not moved forward to combat activity. And there's a reason for that. They cannot do the job.
That's why it's called the Defense Love Institute, Sergeant Major.
Yes, that's
Yeah, that's why.
yeah. So if I were a matchmaker, I would send the person to DLI to find a spouse. Okay,
Yeah.
and then Dad points. And this is an important difference between men and women.
One space and watch what happens.
This is an important difference between men and women. Bloodthirsty, right? Mario and I have both been downrange. We've both been in the sandbox, and this is an immutable fact we've talked about many times on the show before. The thing that makes the American military feared around the world, and is becoming less the case because of the way that Democrats and DEI sociopaths have handled the military over the last several years. The thing that makes the American military feared around the world, we have superior technology, we have superior tactics and training, right? One of the less repeated slogans is "We own the night," right?
Yeah,
the U.S. military is superior in almost every aspect to every other military. But the thing that makes us feared is that our soldiers are almost sexually excited by the prospect of doing violence to evil people.
Mhm.
The first time I put my thumbs on a Maud Deuce butterfly, I was hard as Chinese algebra. I couldn't roll out of bed for a week. Right? Now, the other piece that the Sergeant Major mentioned, the matchmaker would send a person to DLI. This is almost completely unrelated. Y'all, when I enlisted, my dad pulled me aside and we had two conversations. Right? We had two very distinct conversations that have been stuck with me for the rest of my life and I'll never forget. First, he told me about being careful because, hey, son, you're enlisting in a wartime military. There is a high possibility that you will deploy and go to war, and you need to understand the dangers of that. And I started saying, like, yeah, Dad, I get it. There's, I might have to go fight. I understand that. Like, I mean, in fact, part of me, that's why I'm going, because I want to do my duty. I'm applying to the military. I want to go be a Russian linguist so I can kill commies. Didn't quite work out that way, but that was the idea. And Dad said, no, son, shut up and let me finish. Okay. And he explained to me that the first time you get a taste of that combat thing, it's addictive. And I've said many times, I've told my soldiers, I've told my friends, I've told my kids, guys, gunfights are like drinking and smoking and having sex. I don't recommend any of them because you're just never going to get tired of it. Um, but
I'll take your word for it.
the other conversation, and this is the one that made my life what it is today, which is fantastic, is Dad told me, boy, while you're out there, go ahead and find you an enlisted woman because she has her own paycheck, she has her own health insurance, she's required by law to stay physically fit, right, and to fit in that uniform, right. They're going to make her stay looking good, and she's going to be tested for drugs and STDs at least twice a year. And I said, that's really good fucking math. And here I am in my early 40s, relatively retired and married to a hot young wife.
And I'll tell you the other thing. The Navy has a few better choices, but especially for the Army, if a woman can look good wearing ACUs, she's gonna look even. I mean, can you imagine when she takes them off? I mean, it's not exactly complimentary.
As far as sex appeal goes in women's fashion, ACUs are essentially a black trash bag.
It's like it's Burkateer. It's
No, in fairness, I got me a Navy girl, so they have a wide selection of uniforms, many of which are tailored. Diego says nothing prepares you for how addictive combat is. It really doesn't. That's part of how the airsoft collection happened. Is after I came back, I just it's like methadone for murder, right?
Yeah,
I mean, Mario and I used to play airsoft in Hawaii. You remember, Mario? You remember that one indoor field we used to go to? We had to go through Honolulu to get there, and it was.
Is it the open field place, or is it the one that was kind of built up and it had like
the one that was like in a strip mall? Right, so we had to park like 2 blocks away, and we'd bring the collection of airsoft guns. So we had them on a cart.
Yeah.
So every other Saturday we'd have like 6 or 7 actual professional warfighting soldiers in combat gear, like in blackout special ops type gear, walking down the street in essentially downtown Honolulu, pushing a cart covered in gun cases, and on the top of it we had this crate that had claymore mines and hand grenades hanging off the sides of it. And we're just walking through Honolulu on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning. We got looks.
Quite suspicious. That was a nasty little arena. That was all CQB. Like you got hurt in there. I've seen a few people freak out.
I had a knuckle shot off. With a plastic BB, somebody shot my knuckle off.
Yeah.
Like exposed bone.
Yeah, anything over 300 feet per second from a range of 10 feet, like that's almost not fun.
Yeah, with a high enough cyclic rate, you could drill a hole through somebody like that. Yeah, it's not the way you want.
Anyway, so. Going back to these
that was a dramatic walk away from the conversation. We can keep rolling for a minute if you want to. Let's talk about the undecided voter for a minute. Because here's the fact is the fate of our country every election cycle.
The undecided voter is a person who doesn't know if they're going to vote. Okay, that's the undecided voter. It's not that they're going to vote for one or the other. It's that they would participate at all. I strongly believe that.
That's a big part of it. And quite simply, if you, especially in the 24-hour news cycle, infinite information era, if at this point, right, we're 85 days out, something like that. Yeah. If at this point you don't know who you're going to vote for, you are not qualified to vote. You should not be voting because it doesn't matter enough for you to do the work to get smart on it.
In a slower information cycle, the attempted assassination of Trump should have basically been a lock as far as the election is concerned.
Yes.
In terms of vibes, okay? But what did you see after that in the 9 days that followed that event? They pulled like 2 or 3 October surprises just to wash, like quick cycle the hell out of the media, like news cycle. You had basically with Biden dropping out. Okay, that changed the whole metric in the media. So they had something completely different to talk about, and it overshadowed, the events that had just occurred in Butler, Pennsylvania. So they worked really hard on flushing that out of the news cycle as quickly as they could.
Yes, absolutely. And so if I had my druthers, right, like it's a slow news week right now, but one of the big items that's coming up is the SAVE Act being attached to the continuing resolution, which
Do it.
I'm all for.
It's
The
not going
SAVE
to
Act
help
basically,
in this election cycle, but do it anyway. Fuck it.
correct. Well, I mean, I'm on board every time the government gets shut down. I'm pleased as punch if the government gets shut down. That always makes my day. But the other piece, obviously, we don't need foreigners voting in our elections. That's who hostile foreign aliens are. Is they're foreigners, right? The so-called migrants, illegal immigrants, undocumented, what have you. They're foreigners. They're not Americans. But I would go so much further. If I had my druthers, in order to be a voter in this country, you would need some kind of civil service, to be a landowner, and to have children. Now, it may sound like what I'm talking about right now is I'm just describing myself, landowner, children, veteran. But the fact I have held that position, I have said this before I was a father, before I was a veteran, before I was a landowner. I became those things in time. So until quite recently, in fact, I would not have been qualified to vote under the system that I would prefer. And I don't say it arbitrarily. If you don't have those three things, okay, forget about the civil service for just a minute, children and land. You're not a landowner, you don't have kids. You are not interested in the future. The consequences of your vote don't affect you, but they do affect the hell out of those of us who are landowners with children, right? Cameron mentions Starship Troopers, service guarantee citizenship. I'm actually totally on board for that. Now, the civil service thing, that is less about, there's an element there to, okay, you are a person who cares about the country, and so you've done your duty. Here's the thing, though. As a veteran, and I think I can speak for Mario a bit on this too, as veterans, we have had the experience of living and working inside of that system. And it is drastically disillusioning. Thomas Sowell is a great example. Thomas Sowell is a famous black conservative economist and a Marine, by the way, who is still fucking writing. He's like 95, but Thomas Sowell has done many interviews where he talked about being a devoted communist, or I'm sorry, a devoted socialist when he was still in college, and even after he got out of college. And now he's one of the most conservative right-wing thinkers you can find. And he's been asked many times in interviews, what made you change? What changed it for you? He said, oh, that's easy. I worked for the government.
Yeah.
For him, it wasn't the military. He was too young and dumb when he was a Marine to really process the part of it that I'm talking about here. For him, it was the post office. I think or the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It was the Bureau of Labor Statistics. He worked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics for a while and would say, hey, if we do X, Y, Z, we can learn, WQ and Foxtrot. And they'd say, oh, no, we don't want to learn those things, because if we learn those things and the outcome information doesn't agree with our current objectives, then we have to do more work. But basically, working for the government made him a conservative, because he learned that there is nothing the government can do, that anything that it appears that the government can do better than can be done by a private industry is guaranteed to be a thing which doesn't need to be done to begin with. Everything legitimate that the government can possibly do is always and everywhere done better, cheaper, more efficiently by private industry, without exception.
And life in the military, especially on the enlisted side, I mean, is low key socialism. That will be your, that is an experience of living in a type of socialist society. Okay,
I wouldn't even say low key socialism. I mean,
it's forced equality, and
and I mean,
as they say,
military structure. Make no mistake, a military structure necessarily should be a socialist one, because it is the responsibility of the organization to maintain the people within the organization. But quite differently, for being a civilian citizen out living in the free world and the free economy and the free market and building your future, your legacy, et cetera, et cetera. When you are a military soldier, you are not a person. You are a piece of equipment. And that piece of equipment has to be maintained and operated to the highest degree of efficiency and effectiveness possible. It is not different materially than owning slaves.
Yeah, I didn't say it was a bad thing. In fact, I would be okay with it. I'm fine with it in the military case because you need that hierarchy. The problem is it's not it's not really equality, okay, in a lot of senses. Because look, I did 12 years in there. I did 12 years, and I have a pattern recognizing brain. I'd hope so. I was an analyst, okay. And what I noticed on the enlisted side, the easiest way to get promoted was to be an average black female.
Speaking of pattern recognition, analyst, do you recognize this?
I do. Of course. Start at the wait. Where is that? Oh shit!
That's Schofield.
Are you kidding me? Do you really have that?
I sure hell do. I came across it unpacking the other day. I've used that map many, many times to find mangoes and hogs.
But yeah, like I said, the fastest way to get promoted in the enlisted ranks is to be an average black woman. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just true. And you look at like the senior enlisted ranks. Okay, they made such a push. Okay, to promote black soldiers. Okay, that it's almost like it's not even diverse. Like at the sergeant major level, it's not even diverse anymore, because they forgot to promote the white people. It's literally just diversity, at the upper ranks at this point. My brother is still in. He complains about it all the time. Not publicly, of course. You can't. You'll be thrown out.
Right.
But, so, and like I said, to tie it back, like I said, it's socialism. But you find out, like in real socialism, some animals are more equal than others, and you're not equal enough. So, yeah, we're off.
Let's get back to the undecided voters. Okay, so Diego says someone unable to purchase land is not uninterested or uncommitted. That's a fair criticism, but that's a fair criticism of the point that I made. It is, but to support my point, that non-land owners without children have been voting in our elections for 200 years is one of the big key factors in our having come to a Biden-Harris administration, which has itself dramatically moved the possibility of land ownership away from the American citizen by a wide margin, right? The mortgage on a $250,000 house, if you're in the 2% range, like you would have been buying a house under Donald Trump, right? You pay that, if you just pay everything on time, you pay the full amount. You don't save yourself any money by paying early, et cetera, et cetera. 30-year mortgage, $250,000 house, you're paying about $340,000. Same house at the 6 and 7% range that we're talking about under Biden-Harris, you're paying nearly $600,000 for that house, right? Not quite, but nearly triple. That difference is outrageous, and that really does move the needle away from the average citizen, because it's not just that the house is more expensive. The house being more expensive makes it more difficult for people to afford the house, but it also
What about
it also
every other industry that is involved who's selling something or providing a service to people who own a home? It's the biggest drag on the economy, I'd say, right now, is the low rates of home ownership, because everything spawns from there. Okay, for so much of the industry.
Well, I mean, you got two major things. You've got real estate and energy. If you screw up either of those, you screw up everything.
Yeah.
Right. But back to the affordability piece of it. The
Yes, you did. Liberty.
The house being less affordable means that you have to be an even better qualified borrower to get your hands on that mortgage to begin with, which means that fewer people are able to qualify for the same home loans. It's the opposite effect of the stated objective from the home buyer assistance programs that created the '08 crash, right? Liberty Girl points out in the beginning you did have to be a landowner,
yes,
to vote, and that is correct. In fact, you'll hear about women voters, and women weren't even allowed to vote until the 17th Amendment,
19th.
19th, until the 19th Amendment, and they always say that, like, people who say, well, women didn't even get the vote until almost 100 years ago. In fact, it was 104 years ago. Women didn't even get the vote until 100 years ago. Okay, hold on.
You can't
didn't have the vote until 50 years before that, or 100 years before that, right? It's not like men have been voting on everything since 4000 BC. There wasn't a United States for men to vote in.
Women's suffrage and its consequences is an entirely different show. I'd say, you can't start that right now. Anyway, I do have to go anyway. So if you want to release my bonds, please.
Domini patria filis suspendis.
Yeah, put a sock on my head.
I'll release you. Ska. All right, guys. So I know we drifted way off the topic at the end there, but I think overall we did a pretty good coverage on that topic at the beginning of the show. I hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Thank you so much for watching today. I've got a couple little housekeeping things that I want to do real quick before I cut it for the day. So there was a mass shooting yesterday, and as a rule, I don't cover mass shootings on this show the day they happen or the day after. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. Today, we're going to hear all kinds of nonsense from the Kamala Harris campaign and Tim Walz, and every crying, shit-faced liberal out there is going to come and scream about taking away your guns, et cetera, et cetera. So don't be surprised if tomorrow morning's show is more about dealing with gun grabbers and making the case, making the argument, than it is about the DGUs that I usually like to cover on a Friday. Just be prepared for that, and that's probably what we're looking at tomorrow morning. Generally, this has been a slow news week, and I actually meant to mention this earlier. This has been a slow news week, and next week will be a relatively slow news week as well, I suspect, because 60 days out from the election, we have one candidate that just cannot be tolerated to be in front of a camera. So we're going to get inundated with fluff piece bullshit to try and help Kamala hide, because every time she opens her mouth in front of a camera, she loses a point in the polls, and they just can't let that happen. I credit where it's due, given that they have probably the least qualified candidate in history. And I mean candidate, right? I could probably make the case that there have been presidents who were less qualified to be president than Kamala Harris, but I'm talking about candidacy. She is the least competent candidate to ever attempt the office in history, because she is to the greatest degree, the candidate who, when you hear her speak, you turn a little more red, a little more conservative, right? She loses votes every time she gets in front of a camera because she is not qualified to campaign as a candidate. So she does have a debate on the 10th, Diego, and I would not be surprised to see her cancel it. I'm not going to say that I'm predicting that. I'd maybe give it 50-50 odds, but she is going to be destroyed in that debate. She is going to be absolutely run over. She can have the best debate prep team and advisors on the planet. But when she gets up on that stage, it's going to be her that has to do what she's been advised to do, and she's not capable of doing that. So thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.